Good morning, everybody. John Della Rose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction. I've been looking at all the Worldcon stuff the last couple days, as you know, and I've been pretty excited about it. It's in my hometown coming up in August, and I'm happy to attend, despite, it's going to be 4,000 or 5,000 people. It's going to be 4,000 or 5,000 people at the con. 2,000 of them are probably pro or semi-pro authors. Maybe 3,000 or 4,000 of them will be. And I've got 20 people who, want to cause a little trouble. So 20 out of 4,000 or 5,000 is not a large number. So I get questions periodically. I got one yesterday from a reader. Sent me how do you deal with all this negativity? How do you deal with all this? And I said, you know what? It's not that many people. And I remind myself that. I remind myself it's a numbers game. But for every one person who's very loud, they're always very loud, right? They're on file 770, they're on this, they're on that, they're talking smack, right? Like the gal yesterday who was bugging me on Twitter. But there's one of them, and there's 100 other people I'm interacting with for every one of them. It's like that at Worldcon too. So, looking into Worldcon the other day, or yesterday rather, I saw that Spider Robinson is going to be the guest of honor, and one of the critics, one of my critics, Mr. John Scalzi, New York Times bestseller John Scalzi, was posting on that thread the other day about how I should be elated to be even in the presence of the greats, etc., etc., etc. And I just looking through the Worldcon list. It's like most of the people I think of as greats are no longer with us, sadly. They're like Paul Anderson, Robert Heinlein, Edgar Rice Burroughs. They're not going to be attending Worldcon, believe it or not. So I was like, I kind of took that as something to laugh about over the course of the day. And then, people I think are as modern greats, like Larry Corriere or whatnot, he's not going to attend Worldcon. So no, I don't have that feeling. But that changed very drastically when I discovered that Spider Robinson was going. Spider Robinson is not talked about very much in culture these days, and that's kind of what we do here at the Pulp Revolution. I don't want to speak for the Pulp Revolution. I mean, I'm kind of in the wings of it, but it's kind of my thing. I like going back and finding these older works and finding some gems, not in sort of the 90s forward modern times of dark sci-fi. And, Spider Robinson actually kind of fits that. Now, in some ways, he's different. He definitely follows from the Campbell-Heinlein model of writing, in which he definitely is more of that literary type where he's actually, really trying to communicate something, really trying to show in his prose that he's got value like, like a real author's, not like that science fiction trash, And so that he was part of that group kind of changing science fiction, which morphed into what it became today. But I don't hold him responsible for what modern writers have done with his work. His work itself actually was kind of different, and I enjoyed it. I say was. I really hope he's going to come out with a couple more books here. Spider has been writing, I believe, professionally since the late 60s, maybe early 70s. And he was kind of like a protege of Heinlein. And really into Heinlein. He always talked highly about Heinlein. He still talks highly about Heinlein. And, Heinlein actually kind of took him under his wing a little bit, too. So he became friends with their family, and, it's obvious where his influences came from because of that, right? It's like, obviously, my writing as it goes on is going to be a lot influenced by, say, like John C. Wright and Fox Day because they talk to me, right? That's just kind of how it works. So he got influenced by Heinlein, and Heinlein is the literary of the literary for science fiction. He's the one praised for what he did, kind of, especially in his later works, kind of pushing those boundaries of sex and pushing those boundaries of sort of the way narratives worked. And I thought those later works weren't so great, but in the 60s and 70s, Heinlein was fantastic. And Spider Robinson really started selling short stories kind of in the way that really felt a lot like Heinlein. Everybody was saying he's the next Heinlein. And what's bizarre to me, I mean, a lot of kids, if I go around, people, by kids I mean people my age, if I go around and talk about Spider Robinson to a lot of people my age, a lot of people just go, I don't know who that is. And it's really sad to me. His works really have not been plugged like others. And there's a reason for that. And I'll get into that in a second. So I discovered Spider Robinson, gosh, in my early 20s, maybe late teens. It was actually if you follow my Twitter, my troll Jan, who likes to talk smack about me a lot, actually was responsible for introducing me to Spider Robinson. So thank you, Jan. And she told me to pick up his book Stardance, which he actually wrote with his wife Jean. And hi, San Jose Police Department. That's interesting. It's really interesting. That's really interesting. So it was introduced, Stardance was introduced to me by Jan, and Stardance is pretty cool. So Jean was kind of like a professional dancer, I guess. This is Spider Robinson's wife. She's it's the feds, San Jose Police Dep. Is this a fake account? I'll find out. Somebody trying to be funny here? Yeah, this isn't. Yeah, it is, but that's okay. That's cute. Okay. All right. So Stardance it's a hard science fiction story. It's about a dance troupe wanting to go up into space and just trying to zero gravity dancing as a sort of performance art sort of thing, and very very hippie concept, very art for the sake of art concept. I love that kind of thing personally. I think art for the sake of art is a fantastic thing, and it's something that we don't applaud enough in our current culture as we're kind of jaded by everything that goes down. But his Spider's wife, she's no longer with us, unfortunately, was I guess, professional dancer, and something happened where she couldn't dance any longer, and so it was always kind of like her dream to be like a professional dancer, and so Spider wrote this, and with her help, to get all the technical details of dancing correct, and it ended up very beautiful. And I think I like the husband and wife working together thing. I mean, that gets me right here in the feels, right? And so they went up into space. So the concept is they go up into space and they do their dance troupe, and they have their typical struggles of funding and people trying to knock them down and all that. And the main character is a woman who also, I mean, it's definitely modeled after his wife Jean, who, she's determined that she doesn't have that like stick physique. She's not fat, but she doesn't have the stick physique. So she's determined she can't dance on Earth, and I think she has knee problems, as I recall. It's been a while since I read it. But I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. Highly emotional, great character work. It's interesting take and an interesting on. It's got a first contact element to it too, and it's got an interesting. It's got a very different way crises and problems are handled in it that I can't think of another book to compare it to. I didn't like the Starseed and Starmind were the sequels. I think Starseed was all right. Starmind got off on a different track where it was. I mean, props that it was. He told a different story and didn't just kind of go linearly like this. But it was it was not what I expected when I read it. I guess maybe I'll read it again. She can't get good roles because she's too tall. There we go. I remember that. All right, thank you for that. But yeah, she was fantastic. Beautiful book. And Starseed was more of a direct sequel, and Starmind went off in a very different direction. That's right. So that's how I kind of discovered him. I read that trilogy, and I was like, wow, this guy's a pretty good writer. But everybody kept talking about this thing called Callahan's Crosstime Saloon, and I looked at it, and let me see if I can pull up I'm going to pull up the cover. The cover, when I was a younger lad, these sort of covers were like indicative of like bad 70s work. And, I've come to appreciate these kind of covers now that every cover is a bland single character or two characters kind of like with a pouty mouth and looking sexy. And that's what every cover is these days. I kind of appreciate these more now, but at the time I didn't appreciate it. And I was kind of like, is this this book looks wonky. Like, am I going to like it? It claims it's the best science fiction ever. But am I going to like it? Let me pull the cover up for you. There it is. So I mean, you see this, you see a weird floating head right there. You got the bar. It looks like Cheers or something, and you don't really get a sense of like why this is hailed as like excellent science fiction. It's not really a science fiction-y cover. Well, Callahan's Crosstime Saloon is a collection of short stories, really, and they kind of tie together over the course of it. And it is basically it's a modern times bar, 1970s bar, and they're hanging out. And after you get the sense of it, I want a bar like this. Like, I want to go down to a local bar and hang out with all these people and talk about life and share life. Hey, that's maybe what we're doing here. But it'd be nice to have that locally, right? And you kind of pine for that by the end of the book. It's got a lot of different issues. Yeah, they are reusing covers which are jumbled, unidentifiable. Yeah, I agree with that. But I was a little skeptical because it looked a little weird at the time. Some of the stories were a little dated, and you have to come at it. And this is where Spider's really cool. You have to come at this book in a not serious perspective. He is almost every story in this is like setting up a giant pun sort of joke. Some of them are harder to understand than others. Some of them are culturally dated to the 70s, so it's like, at this point. Some of them are really amazing. And stand the test of time. So it's all over the map in that regard. But he definitely used the literary device of punning to just make a silly, off the wall book, and it was fun. When I first read it, I did not come into that book with the proper mindset. I was looking after Stardance. Stardance is like an emotionally, like, you want to cry at the end of Stardance. It's an emotionally just taxing book, and something that you just really get gripped into, like really heavy into this character. And this is kind of the opposite. It is just like, I mean, yeah, there's hard moments and you feel for the characters, but it's all about bringing the levity. It's all about saying life is too short. Let's all have fun. Let's all be together. And so when I read that the first time, I wasn't ready for that. But when I read it the second time, I had a newfound respect for it and realized what he was going for. And, I appreciate now, especially now in 2017, somebody just making a book that's just meant to be silly, meant to be fun, and yet also meant to be kind of serious sci-fi at the same time. You can't get that sort of vibe out of books anymore. And I think that's what impresses me about Spider Robinson the most. He has just a good vibe to him. And I sound like a hippie when I say this, but the guy is just positive. He just radiates with love, and that is what the hippie movement was supposed to be. That is he represents, I guess, the idealism of the hippie movement, which, as the boomers have aged, his compatriots and their descendants have just become like bitter people, which is why most of our literary fiction in this genres now are dark and edgy and just filled with depravity, and that's what spun off of that. But what Spider has as a person, now I've never met the guy. This is totally just from what I've read of his books, read of his essays. I've listened to his podcast. He had a podcast for a while, and he would just talk about whatever he wanted to talk about. He'd play a song. He's a big music guy, which I also love. He'd play a song on his guitar, and he'd usually focus on some old blues song nobody had ever heard of. Just really loves music, and is passionate about it. And he just has a great, healthy attitude towards life. Like, he's not going to bother nobody bother him. We're going to just do what we want, and we're going to love each other. And I freaking love that. I guess I would love to be that in some regard, to live that constantly myself. I try to, but I'm I don't know. I fail sometimes. So that was great, and that book series went. Callahan's deal went on for several books. The last one's Callahan's Key, which came out in 2001. So it spanned 74 to 2001. Spider's not that kind of pulp writer that can come out with books 3 or 4 a year or whatever. He's the type that really takes, and these are all short books too. They're very short, which I love. I love short books. And but he's the type that takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years to make sure it's perfect. And you know, I mean, there's benefit and value to that too. So those books came out over the course of time. I think the last couple were a little different, but you know, they all have value and they're all fun enough. So I enjoyed it. I think probably, you know, just looking at his best science fiction work, just from a like looking at serious science fiction, I would probably go with it's Spider's 1976 novel. It's called Telempath, and you know, it's one of those like, you know, dealing with telepathy sort of things that we have. You know, they're pretty. Those happen a lot these days, but in the 70s they were kind of new and fresh. And I think that one is probably one of the better books of that I've seen. But yeah, so that's him. I've read, over a dozen of his books. I haven't read all of them. I haven't read the Lifehouse trilogy, and I haven't read a couple of his short story collections. But beyond that, I've read everything he's come out with, and I think he's just a great writer. I just from the sense of him that I get, he seems like a great person. He's everything that I would like these people to be and represent who are standing opposed to me these days. I don't think he would stand opposed to me like a lot of these people are. I think we'd be able to actually, you know, if he were in his prime right now and I were in my prime right now, I think we'd be able to talk and come to an agreement as humans. And you know, maybe we got something a little different, and we'd probably be broadcasting together, being like, "Hey, you know, this is this is how you change the world, guys." And that's the vibe I get from him. Now, I've not talked to him personally. I've never met him personally, as I said. But, you know, he is something to strive for as a writer. He's something to strive for just as an attitude for life. And I'm excited about the Worldcon 2018 now that I know he's coming. So he's an older guy. Ever since his wife's kind of passed, he's been in and out of, you know, some tough health. And again, like, this guy didn't get rich. You know, he's got all these great books. It's really sad. Like, he did not get rich. He doesn't have, you know, he doesn't have this huge, lasting following to where, you know, you probably won't even find his book on a bookshelf, you know, in a bookstore today, just because he wasn't promoted, I feel like. But, you know, I mean, that just goes to show to me that, that promotion is everything. And continued promotion really is what matters, so that's why I keep doing what I'm doing here. But check his work out. I think he's great. I also, you know, like I said, the guy never made it rich or nothing. And I think you know, if you want to support somebody, you know, he's probably a good guy to do so. So that's all I've got about Spider Robinson right now. Like I said, I just know him from his books. I might go back and listen to some of his podcasts again. His podcasts are still up. They've been up for a while. I don't think he's done a new one in several years. He used to have an online diary, which he stopped writing in 2015. And you know, I mean, he just kind of checked out a little bit as he got older here, which I understand. I mean, life's short, and you might not want to spend your last days on the internet and all that. Makes sense. But yeah, he's worth checking out, and I hope you guys do. I would probably start with Telempath or Stardance if you're really into puns. If you're really into puns and funny stuff, Callahan's Crosstown Saloon is the way to go. So hopefully that was useful for you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.